You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me today is the one and only Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, I heard that little sigh before I'm doing well, and I get that because we're kind of here in the home stretch of the Flyer season, and obviously we know at this point they're not making the playoffs. We've talked about that the last couple of shows. So I do want to talk on the positive note here, right? We don't want to just be negative all show and talk about how bad they've been because we've been doing that a lot. So I want to start us off with Wade Allison.
Okay.
Because Wade Allison has looked solid. Is it fair to say that he's maybe been the best player for the Philadelphia Flyers since he's shown up in terms of effort?
One of them, yeah.
Yeah. We did also have another Flyer make his debut this week. We had Jackson Cates skating his first NHL game. Yeah, and he, again, looked fine. We're going to see a lot of this. This is essentially the preseason for next year. At least it seems that's how Alain Vigneault's treating it. A lot of line combinations, a lot of new looks. So what do you see AV doing here with 2 weeks left in the season?
Trying to get through it.
Trying to not lose his job.
I mean, honest to goodness, I'm trying to remember which one it was because they played the Rangers Thursday and Friday. I think it was Friday's game. The second period of that game was some of the worst hockey I've seen in a long time.
Oh yeah,
collectively. I'm not trying to lean it all on the Flyers here. The Rangers look bad too.
Oh, it was just a sloppy period.
You knew you were watching two teams that are not going to the playoffs. That's the bottom line. And if that wasn't enough for you, get ready for 4 against the Devils this week. You know.
Yeah, we'll talk about this 4 set against the Devils. But the Flyers did actually kind of put the final nail in the New York Rangers' coffin on Thursday with their one win this week.
I mean, to an extent, the
Rangers were already on their way out. They were on the outside looking in.
The Rangers have one chance to make the playoffs, and that is get on a run right now.
And the Boston Bruins have to collapse.
Well, it's combined, but what I'm trying to get is that you've got to close the gap. The Rangers or the Bruins are going to have 2 games in hand on the Rangers for the rest of the year. Those 2 games come after the Rangers have played their final game. The only way that they make this through is if they are somehow within 4 points going to these final 2 games that they have, which are against Boston. So you play head-to-head twice at the end of the year.
And you got to beat them clean twice.
And then you have to beat them clean, and then you have 2 games left that you have to hope Boston either collapses in those or that you have created enough of a gap by somehow coming back that it works that way. But that's really their only shot. Like they need to be there with those 2 games left.
They need to be perfect from
here on out. They kind of do. I mean,
yeah.
I'd have to go back and see exactly what they post that the
there's something in the neighborhood of 10 games left, and I think they're sitting at 6 points out for them. So it's a long road to hoe for the New York Rangers for sure.
Their tragic number at last check was 11. The Flyers number is 7. The Rangers is 11. I believe. But the Rangers have I'm trying to pull up their schedule really fast to see because the Rangers have 2 things that work in their favor right away, and that's a game on Sunday night as we record this and Tuesday against Buffalo. Okay. So that's 2 that you can probably lean on and say, okay, that you got a shot there.
If you're going to make the playoffs, you have to get 4 if you're the Rangers there, for sure.
You have to get 4 against in the 2 against Buffalo, especially when Boston is playing 2 of those same days against Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Not that Boston can't beat Pittsburgh, but that at least is a competition level that you sit there and you say, you could close that gap in those 2 days, possibly.
If the Bruins were the team playing the Devils this week, the Rangers would kind of be done.
Yeah. I mean, well, the Bruins also just played Buffalo twice and lost a game. Yeah. Like that goes into play. You have to acknowledge that, and because after that, then the Rangers have 2 against the Islanders and 2 against Washington before playing the 2 against Boston. You need to pretty much come out of this somehow. If you can come out of this somehow, down 2 points in the standings with Boston having 2 games in hand,
going into that little 2 games,
into the Islanders and Washington. If then you can possibly actually look at that and talk about the possibility of closing the gap to something like 1 or tied going into your 2 games.
But we're still talking about the Boston Bruins having to lose most or all of their hockey games, to even get into that situation.
And Boston's got 2 against Buffalo and 2 against New Jersey, while the Rangers have 2 against the Islanders and 2 against Washington.
So the schedule swings.
The only thing and the only reason I say it plays into their favor is because of the fact that not plays in their favor, but the only reason I say it works is if they somehow come into that 2 games at the end of the season within 2 points, a chance to tie then take the lead maybe, even if it's 3 points. Boston closes out their season with basically makeup games from reschedulings, and the opponents are the Islanders and Washington. So they do not have easy games to like. It's not like they've got 2 games waiting with Buffalo to close out the year.
Right.
And you can be playing these games, and who knows? It's 2 against 2 teams that are going to the playoffs. I mean, it's a little surprising actually, because I'm pretty much getting an email just about every single time somebody clinches a playoff spot.
Yeah, so I was actually going to bring that up since we're talking about playoff teams here. If I told you at the beginning of the season that Vegas would be the first team to clinch a playoff spot, would you be particularly surprised?
Not really.
Okay. If I told you that Colorado was the second team to clinch a playoff spot, would you be particularly surprised?
No.
All right, how about Minnesota third? That one's a surprise, huh?
Yeah.
Especially going into the season, right? If I tell you that in January...
The only reason that's surprising is, I guess, because of the gap. Like, that, it just shows
that
how
Central Division is wild. Or, I'm sorry, that West Division is wild.
They don't call it the Wild West for nothing, I guess.
Yeah,
but
the drop-off from Minnesota to Arizona, 3rd and 4th place in the division. 3rd and 4th place in the division.
I mean, there's not that much...
18 points.
There's not that much of a structure difference, though, between, in the Central, the same thing. There's a clear-cut top 3, and then... the only thing that's different, it's
a smaller gap.
No,
the gap's half the size.
Yeah, but the only thing is, again, it's a battle for 4th again, and probably realistically with 2 teams.
So is St. Louis really going to mess around and not make the playoffs here?
I'd be interested to see if it happens. I mean,
I know a lot of our listeners are here for Flyers talk, and we'll talk about that. And if they want to listen to you talk about the NHL, they can listen to Open Ice Hits with Hunter Brody. But we will talk a little bit of playoffs here again because the Flyers are out. It's not particularly fun to talk about. I mean,
what are we going to come on here and talk about
exactly.
after the season's over? I mean, this is probably what you're going to get because for a little while we won't have much to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the playoffs because I'll certainly be watching.
You know what? No, hey, you know what we'll be talking about actually? Because I just saw it pop up on Twitter for a second because I forgot about this.
Okay.
So the Phantoms came back this week because they had a COVID pause. They ended up losing badly on Wednesday because they had half of a roster and had 1 day of practice, basically.
It was the Flyers in Lake Tahoe, right?
Yeah, but then they won 2 games over the weekend, pretty well. Like, they won Friday, they won Saturday. They're 14-4-3 this season in limited gameplay, which we knew was going to happen anyway. Like, there's not as many games. But they look playoff bound, and they look like a good team, and they look like a fun team, and they look like they'll get guys back like Wade Allison for the playoff run.
I was about to say, are there any other guys who could theoretically go down? Like, for example, could Phil Myers can't still go down? Travis Sanheim still can't go down. Is there anybody who still has any sort of AHL eligibility where they could theoretically go help this team?
They would have had to have been sent down at
before the trade deadline. Okay.
Yeah. So I think
Morgan Frost didn't get sent down at the deadline, did he?
Morgan Frost, I think, just is full on recovery from this point out.
Oh, he's not. He's done, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't know if he was coming back at any point.
If he was even remotely close to playing, they might have done that. You're right. Like, they might. No, if he was remotely close to playing, though, you're probably right. He might have been able to go down and try to play minor league games just to get something going.
Right.
Well, especially when you barely played. I mean,
right.
How many games has this kid played now? Like this, here we go again. This is Oscar Lindblom, Nolan Patrick all over again. How many games has he played in 2 years? You know, they shut him down. The minor leagues stop. He's not playing then. He spends the entire playoff run as part of the Flyers, but never really gets into a game when everybody was kind of asking for it. Right. Then he does finally get the call. He plays 2 games, and he gets hurt, and he's out for the year.
Yeah, and it's a shame, obviously.
That is a shame.
Yeah, but the nice thing is, I don't want to say nice thing, obviously, because you never want to see somebody miss this kind of significant time with an injury. It's not the Nolan Patrick situation where it's a, genetic migraine disorder where we don't know what's going on.
Right.
Who knows how long it's going to... And it's not Oscar Lindblom where it's cancer. It is, hopefully, knock on wood, a fairly, quote-unquote, normal injury and can be rehabbed normally, and he comes back and is 100% with very little problem. Because, again, this is something that I'm sure NHL doctors and trainers have a little more experience with than cancer and concussion diagnosis or migraine disorders. Well,
and in fairness, Chuck Fletcher did address it, like not at the deadline press conference, but the one before that, I think. And it was, he's progressing. It's not like I don't think they ever actually said the words they're shutting him down. But let's be realistic here. He didn't get.
There's no real reason for him to come back.
Well, not even that, but he didn't get sent down to the minors, as far as I know. And there's 9 games left in the season, and right. It's gonna be, and you're gonna be done in 2 weeks. Do you think he's coming back in 2 weeks? Probably not. So you start rehabbing when you can, and that's pretty much all there is to it.
Right.
But that was one thing I was trying to say. That's one thing we can be able to talk about down the road is the Phantoms will probably have a bit of a playoff run, which will be fun because you'll have guys who you want to pay attention to. That's for sure because Cam York's going to be part of that too. Actually, better yet, let me throw this little tidbit in too because somebody who had a really good weekend, who's going to be with the team for the foreseeable future as of now, the OHL shut down for the year.
Yep.
So that means Tyson Forrester and Zayd Wisdom. Zayd Wisdom was not playing in those games, so I think he's battling a little something. But Tyson Forrester had 3 goals over the weekend or something like that.
Tyson Forrester is starting to look like a player.
He is up to 9 goals and all of them. I mean, the Phantoms have only played, what is that then?
I think we talked about 20-ish games.
Like 21 games, I think is what it is, or 20. And so in his last 13, or I think is what it was, he's a point per game player with 9 goals.
Is that good?
That's pretty good.
Or maybe,
I'm sorry, maybe it's 11, I think, actually. It's 13 points and 11.
Especially when we're talking about a first-year pro
and he's 19.
Who shouldn't even be allowed to be playing in the AHL right now.
Actually,
right, right now he would be because the season might be over. You know what I mean?
Well, right, but I'm saying like he should be making like a pro debut possibly if they look at him and go, wow, look at the OHL season you had. You can't get it. Like you need to be playing better competition. Let's give you a tryout.
There's no reason not to put him on the NHL roster for a game at this point, right? You're coming down the stretch. You're playing some pretty meaningless games. You give the kid a shot.
Look, I've heard this argument a few times. I'm not saying you should be opposed to it. I just don't see them doing it to 19-year-olds.
And listen, and I'm not
Cam
saying
York will be up here by next weekend.
Right. And I'm not saying you bring him up and you put him on your top line and you play him for 22 minutes. But I think you bring the kid up, let him play a game or two if he plays well. Let him play that 6-8 minutes, bottom pair or bottom line role. Just get a little experience, get a little taste for the show.
I just don't see it happening at this point because of the fact that if there was even a shot it was going to happen, you'd call him up to your taxi squad by now, just to give him just to let him skate in practices with the team.
I wonder if you're going to see him, you might see him this week against New Jersey, and if that's the case, he'll probably hit the taxi squad tomorrow. Or whenever the Phantoms. I mean, I don't know the Phantom schedule honestly, but if there's a hole in the Phantom schedule,
to be honest, neither do I at this point because they've had so many changes.
Cancellations and moves. And
I mean, well, here's the thing. If I'm not mistaken, they play tomorrow, Monday, in a game that was. So here's the wildness of the AHL season for you. A game that was suspended after the first period due to a COVID protocol,
that one.
which they're now not resuming the game. They're just restarting.
Okay, that's good.
It is good.
Probably the correct call.
Right. Look. Here's the weird part. There was one goal scored by both teams, so it was a 1-1 game at the end of the first period. The stats are going to be upheld, but they're going to yeah.
So they're going
to restart the game.
They're kind of like the round robin games in the bubble, where they don't really exist, but your stats kind of count. And they were, if you remember, they were postseason game, but they were exhibition game. They were very strange games for the stat keepers. And I feel like that little 1 period experiment is going to be a similar anomaly in the stat book.
I guess. I mean, either way, look, he'll play then. I would imagine in that AHL game. I just don't see it. You know, I know people would like to see it because they sit here and they go, "Oh, here sounds like someone with potential. Here sounds like."
Right. My theory is why not? Right. Like if you're gonna not be particularly great, if you're gonna give the new kids a chance, if you're gonna try new things and start figuring out what your roster is gonna look like next season, why not?
I mean. I still think you're already doing that, and you're doing it to an extent. Like, I don't think you're going to see them try to find a way to sit down somebody else. That's kind of my point too. Like, if someone's hurt and can't play for the rest of the year, then yes. If you need to fill bodies, then you'll try to get creative about it. You'll do what you can. But like, they're going to do this with Cam York as it is, and you got to figure out who's coming out besides Sam Moran or Phil Myers or. Insert name here, you know,
Robert Hagg or
who's Cam York playing for? Like you got to ask that question, and you know that's coming. You know,
see, but at this point,
because let's put it this way: defensively, you could call up 2. You could call up York, and you could call up Igor Zamula, who also had a good weekend, by the way.
The only Philadelphia Flyer I care about playing in all the remaining games at this point is Ivan Provorov, and that's only because he has an Iron Man streak. Any other Flyer at this point can sit. I don't care if they scratch Jake Voracek. I don't care if they scratch Travis Sanheim. because at this point you're experimenting with new things and you're trying to get these new players out. I'm really looking at it as an exhibition game.
As long I was going to throw in, because you're saying the only name you care about is Ivan Provorov. I assume
Claude Giroux, probably.
No, I assume you're excluding certain players to an extent because of the fact that like it should be a given that they should play.
No,
is that what you're
no. Jake Voracek can sit. Kevin Hayes can sit.
No. Like what I'm saying is that I wouldn't sit Wade Allison for the rest of the year.
Probably no. That's fair.
Like,
if we're learning the new
about.
players,
right?
Right.
I'm saying no very young player. Yeah.
But no veteran spot is safe.
That's fair.
And I don't mean safe as in long-term security. Again, I'm talking about giving a kid a shot.
Like I'm sitting here saying Tanner Laczynski, when you come back healthy enough, you should be playing every game for the rest of the year. Jackson Cates, play for the rest of the year.
Right.
Wade Allison, play for the rest of the year.
If they told me they were scratching James Van Riemsdyk tonight to give Jackson Cates a spot in the lineup because they didn't have another spot, I'd say okay. I don't love it because JVR has been one of your better goal scorers this year. But in terms of at this point, it's not about winning games. It's not about the rest of the season. It's about figuring out who you have and what you have to work with and who's getting contracts over the summer.
I'm not opposed to, like, again, if you can play him the rest of the year, I'd play Nolan Patrick the rest of the year too, because this is again like the prolonged preseason for you. Like
probably Oscar Lindblom as well.
Lindblom, I understand at this point though. Like if he
needs a rest, give him a rest.
You're right. From an energy standpoint, if you need to not play him in a game, I've seen flashes of him enough to go, I know he can get there at some point.
Right.
Like,
I think he
needs another offseason. I think we ultimately, as you know, in the same way I've said about the team, we over-evaluated where Lindblom was going to be a year out from cancer. That's probably what it was. Like
I agree. And we've seen in Oscar Lindblom that he doesn't quite have the energy. He doesn't quite have the size. He's still putting the weight back on. Like he lost a lot of weight.
Right.
And you can't just snap your fingers and boom, you're back to healthy. That's going to take time. I assume that he's working with a dietitian or a nutritionist of some sort.
I think the team has one, yeah.
But I hope he even does it like over the summer. I hope he like really gets his body back to where it needs to be to be a physical, healthy NHL player.
Yeah, he's a hard worker. He'll do it.
Oh, I know he is, and I have absolutely no doubt. But that I think there's been a little tiny bit of not criticism, but there's been a little maybe Lindblom's not as he gets a pass this year. A lot of the Flyers don't get a pass this year. There's been a lot of poor efforts, and we've called a lot of players out for not giving good effort. Oscar Lindblom's problem has never been a lack of effort.
Right. And the thing is that they have to almost force him to take those games off when the energy level's there. Like, he wants to play as much as possible, but he's also sitting here going, I got to listen to people. If I need the break, I need to take the time. But
at the same time, I do want him getting as much ice time as he safely can, because that's the only way to get back into game shape.
And I mean, look, this is how this offseason's going to play out. You've got to come back with, look, you're going to chalk some things up to the COVID year, and you're going to chalk some things up to when's the right time to move on, or when are you over-evaluating, right? Like, if there's any player I look at and I say, don't base the stats strictly off of 1 year, it's Travis Konechny, because he's been consistent every other year. This year's weird. You're playing a lot of hockey in a short amount of time. Don't overreact to one season for him, but at the same time, I also sit there and I say, don't
don't ignore the red flags.
No, but pump the brakes on what you think he is. Like, everybody looked at the season last year, went, oh, he was going to be a 30-goal scorer last year in a normal length season. Top line winger. Maybe at best he's a second line winger. Maybe at best Ivan Provorov is a number 2, not a number 1. Like top pairing, but number 2, not a number 1. Like, curb your expectations on some of these guys for a minute and let them, instead of just pronouncing them, this guy is the best that's going to be there. He's going to be one of the top guys, all that stuff. Like we sit here and we have this conversation about Provorov, and again, I'm not trying to take away from what Provorov can do. I think he just needs the right partner. But what if he is the 2 to somebody, the 2 to a number 1 instead of the other way around? What if
he might not be Roman Josi, he might be Ryan Ellis.
Right. So do you go out and get it's the difference between saying, do you go out and you get a Matt Dumba and say that's the 2 to the number 1, or do you go out and get Seth Jones? With it, and I'm trying to be reasonable about that. Like, I'm not trying to sit here and say that that's expectation. I'm just trying to throw out names that I know people have said they'd like to see the team like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if this guy was a Flyer, right? Like the in your dreams fantasy draft kind of stuff. But at the same time, you go, Seth Jones is a very clear-cut number 1. So Provorov would be a 2.
I think that's fair to say.
And does that make Provorov the best he can be?
Right. Well, the other thing about Provorov is, I know we talked about him maybe needing the right partner and et cetera, et cetera. Who's the best partner he's played with? Like, on a consistent basis, it was that year that he played with good Shane Gostisbehere.
No, the best partner he's ever had was Matt Niskanen.
Well, right. And then that's obviously...
I mean, you're trying... Basically, literally, the whole point of this offseason is trying to recreate that. Literally, that's the only thing... I'm not saying it's the only thing you have to do, but that's the biggest thing you have to do. And quite honestly, that could change a lot.
Well, and one thing Flyers fans do, and I am completely 100% guilty of it myself, is that they see a young player, and they see progression, and they assume that that progression will continue infinitely. And that player will grow into being, every player is going to be Wayne Gretzky. And I'm guilty of it too, right? I'm guilty of it too. And we thought that about Ivan Provorov, and as things have come around, he's put time on the ice, and he's put games and games and games and games. He's logged hours on the ice. At this point, we have a pretty good idea of what Ivan Provorov is. Ivan Provorov is a very, 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 very good NHL defenseman.
Yeah.
I think that you have a complete argument here that he might not be a true number 1. I think there are a very small handful of true number 1s around the league, so I think he is still in a very high tier. But I don't think... I think we as a fan base need to learn how to temper our expectations, right? You talked about Travis Konechny, and we saw this upward growth. We saw him really break out last season. He really started looking like he was going to be a superstar. And this year...
that doesn't mean he can't be still. That's all I'm saying.
And this year, we were sitting here 45, 50, almost 50 games into the season, and we're looking at a player that's been fairly disappointing in a lot of people's eyes. Now, Travis Konechny, maybe this is an anomaly, right? It's COVID. You're playing 4 or 5 games a week. It feels like Travis Konechny is a player that relies on speed and energy, and maybe that's a little sapped this year. Or maybe we have to face the possibility, like you kind of said, that he's just good, that he's not going to be a superstar, that he's not going to be, Taylor Hall or whatever we think he's going to be. He might be a guy who scores 20-ish goals a year and ends up with around 60 points and plays on your second line and your second power play unit, and you're pretty happy about it. That might just be what Travis Konechny is. But at this point, it's still hard to know that.
I mean...
especially with this year being as weird as it is.
All right, so you make good points, obviously, in that. Here's the thing. There's people on both sides of the argument. There's people who would, if you ask them by looking at this team, they would sit there and say they don't have anybody who's truly great. They just have good players. And that's where it is. I mean, listen, I hear this on the station all the time. And I think
there's some validity to that for the record.
I hear this on the station all the time because basically, when I listen to 97.3 during the day, whenever I'm on, when I'm not on, whatever, when they bring up the Flyers, what Mike Gill says when he goes on and does the afternoon show, when it comes talking about the Flyers, he goes, "What made you believe in the Flyers last year and into this year?" It was Carter Hart. And if they got what you expected out of Carter Hart, then they could be a great team because everybody else is there. But do they have any other great player that compensates that to an extent, or at what point in time do you say it's enough of the same old with it's Giroux, it's Voracek, it's Couturier, it's Van Riemsdyk? Like, at what point do you say that's enough? And that's what he keeps coming back to. The thing that I have a problem with that is I sit there and I start shaking my head when I hear this because I sit there and go, I understand why people are tired of the same core.
Right. But you're looking at the same couple of guys.
But statistically, and again, the reason that people are tired of the same core has less to do maybe with statistics and more with what they see on a goal against. Defensively, Jake Voracek looks checked out.
Blue line
defensively, Sean Couturier is making mistakes. Sean Couturier, quite frankly, doesn't look fully healthy.
No, he's played a poor season.
Right. Claude Giroux, kind of is what he is at this point. He's been on the ice for goals against as much as he's been on the ice for goals for.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking about it, and even if you're looking at the franchise kind of as a whole in like an identity sense, I think it was 2017. Claude Giroux finishes second in the league in scoring ends up not being nominated for the Hart in an absolute joke. Other than that season out of Claude Giroux, where he finished second in the league in scoring, can you remember the last time a Flyer was top 10 in league scoring? Top 5 in league scoring at the end of the year?
Probably the first year that Giroux was making huge noise in like 2012.
Well, right. So when's the last time the Philadelphia Flyers had a superstar?
Well, that's why everybody
that's the problem.
But that's why everybody overemphasizes these guys who are being drafted. What they want to do is they want I believe this was the same year. It might have been. So everybody wants Ivan Provorov to be who would it have been? Miro Heiskanen, I guess, or something like that.
Okay.
And not the same. That's not the same year, but you know what I mean. Like everybody wants him to be that.
Kale McCarr, right?
Right. Everybody wants Travis Konechny to be Connor McDavid, which I believe was the same year. Like, you picked way later than that. That's not who you got. It is what it is, right? Like,
right.
And yeah, you got to ask yourself this too, to an extent. Like, okay, say the Flyers had Jack Eichel, then had one of those top 2 picks in one of those years, right?
Say the Flyers had gotten Nico Hischier instead of Nolan Patrick.
Okay, fine.
How about that?
You can ask yourself that.
I don't know if Nico's a superstar, for the record.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like,
he's certainly further along the path than Nolan Patrick is at this moment, April.
Well, yeah, everybody
25th, 2021.
Well, everybody who would be, from that draft year probably is further along than Nolan Patrick is. But that's why I went with Eichel when I said that. Because, all right, so say they got Jack Eichel that year. What's Jack Eichel done in his career that makes you sit there and say, other than from personal performance, what has he done that's different from Claude Giroux?
Well, we talked about the Philadelphia Flyers being a team full of good but not great players. Buffalo is not that, so it's kind of apples and oranges here. Right?
Yeah,
like Jack Eichel has never had a supporting cast, ever.
I don't know about that. Like, I look at this team and I go, how many of these guys are actually really, truly good? You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, like, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this and I'm going, what year?
That feels dark.
It is a little dark, but like, I'm sitting here,
dark.
But I'm sitting here looking at it, like, I'm saying, we've been doing this with Nolan Patrick for 4 years. Nick Aube-Kubel had a great season last year. This year, he's been awful. So which one is he? I'm going to lean towards awful because he's a young kid who maybe just caught fire with a team that was having a lot of fun.
Yeah, and like, the truth is, with Nolan Patrick and Nick Aube-Kubel, the truth is probably somewhere in between, right? Nolan Patrick isn't the superstar we thought he was going to be when we drafted him number 2 out of Brandon, but he's also not the guy who has 15 points this season or whatever he has. He's having a very, very poor season statistically,
and I can't. To me, I'm sorry, I can't look past that stuff. I think this is what he is.
Listen, and that might be the case.
I have seen 3 seasons of this guy play as inconsistently as it gets, and he is not close to being anything that he was advertised as coming out of that draft year. Even with the potential of injuries, even with what he's gone through physically, this still doesn't add up. Like, this is a kid who this kid put up hundreds of points in junior hockey to then make it to the pros, skip over the AHL because it was like, you're good. This is playing. That's child's play at this point, and he can't top 30 points in a year.
Yeah, and like, I don't want to be the one writing hall passes here. I really don't. I really, really don't, because I want to be critical of this team too. But Nolan Patrick, we're looking at a guy who played 2 seasons. You saw a decent little progression from season 1 to season 2. Mm-hmm. Missed all of season 3 because he got hurt. Season 4 is a 56-game, 4 games a week. He's still not, he should be close to 100% physically at this point because he's been skating the whole time.
Depends on if you take into account the puck that he took off the face earlier in the week too.
Man, well, you know what I mean.
Yes, I do, but I get it.
He's probably somewhere in between, right? I cannot imagine that Nolan Patrick will ever be this bad again. But again, I don't think he is second overall pick, Jack Eichel type.
The problem I have with that is that I don't have more than a 7-game stretch from him probably where I sit there and I go, wow, you're really turning it on. You really caught fire. And that's not enough in a season. That's not enough in a season for me to sit there and say you're going to be better than the 30 points I've seen. Like this is particularly bad this year. But I sit there and I go, I really can't. How am I supposed to, after 3 seasons of this, how am I supposed to be able to really, truly say I think you're more than half a point per game in a full NHL season? I can't. That's all I've got is 30 points, 31 points, and 13?
Yeah,
is that what he has this year?
And you certainly don't want to spend the second overall pick on
right, and that's not what you spend the second overall pick on. Like
guy.
In hindsight, would you rather and you'd rather have anybody from that group? But like you would take Pettersson, you would take Makar, obviously, you would take Heiskanen, you would take any of those guys.
Okay, imagine we go back into the Wayback Machine, and the Philadelphia Flyers select Cale Makar instead of Nolan Patrick, and obviously hindsight 2020, et cetera, because Nolan Patrick, for the record, for people that may not remember. There was no other pick at 2. There was no conversation. There was no debate. The second, I was at a draft party hosted by our friends that we don't necessarily talk about, a certain Flyers outlet. So I was at a draft party that they were doing, and the second the New Jersey Devils took Nico Hischier, the bar erupted in chants of Nolan Patrick immediately because there was no other pick. So the Philadelphia Flyers were not wrong for selecting Nolan Patrick. I just want to make that very clear. Hindsight being 2020, you take Cale Makar and your top pair is Makar Provorov, and you're probably in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Here's the all right. First of all, I don't think that.
Really?
Because I think that Cale Makar got thrown into the perfect storm of. Look who you get to play with. Nathan McKinnon, Gabe Landeskog, Mikko Rantanen. Look who you get to play alongside of. I mean, at that point in time, they, defensively now, he's the centerpiece, but you've got an up-and-coming Sam Girard. You've got Devon Taves now. You've got
Bowen Byram hasn't even showed up on that team yet.
Bowen Byram's barely even showed up for all I care, and they still look great.
Colorado, Joe Sakic is a good general manager.
I only mention their first line as if they're and I'll not to try to sit I think that this team's gotten better with this in the last couple weeks, but I did it like they're a Boston. Once you get past the Bergeron, Marchand, Pasternak thing, you got a little bit left. No, when you get past Landeskog, Rantanen, and McKinnon, you're getting a wave of Burakovsky and Bozak and
Nazem Kadri's there.
Or Kadri, sorry, not Bozak, Kadri. Yeah. I was thinking of the wrong former Leaf for a moment. You know what? Because you mentioned the Blues earlier, so it was on my mind for a minute.
Okay.
But Kadri and Burakovsky and Comfer and
I have no idea. I have no idea how they didn't go out and sign Taylor Hall last summer, but that's neither here nor there.
Because they probably weren't offering him $8 million.
They should have.
Probably. I don't know if they can afford it.
No, you're right.
That's the only reason. No,
either way, Joe Sakic has done a fantastic job.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem with the Nolan Patrick thing. Okay, and first of all, by the way, there are I've heard rumors that Ron Hextall wanted that pick, and there were scouts that were saying don't.
I'm sorry. Are we talking about a Cale Makar pick over Nolan Patrick?
That scouts were advising don't take Patrick. Here's 3 guys behind who could be better.
Really?
And I've heard it as a rumor. That's all I'm saying.
Because I remember public opinion at the time, media opinion at the time, fan opinion at the time was that you were getting either Nolan or Nico, whoever the Devils didn't take.
Because that because
that was the narrative.
No, and you're right about that because it's I was writing stories like that, but beyond me, obviously, since I'm certainly not the most credible that you can go to.
Hey, you're pretty credible. You write for 97.3ESPN.com.
No, I know, but. Bob McKenzie was saying that. Craig Button was saying that. You know what I mean? These are guys who are basically professional, in a weird way, they're professional draft masters, if you will.
Right.
This is what they pour so much into their entire year, into. It is, but their job is they go on, they break down games sometimes. Now that Bob McKenzie's in semi-retirement, we'll basically only see him at the draft.
He does whatever he wants, yeah.
Well, we'll only see him at the draft and free agency and stuff like that, more than likely. But this is what they do. They wait for they wait for the big days is what they do. It's when's the trade deadline? When's the draft? When's free agency? Okay, the game's not the biggest deal because they don't get too in over their heads when it comes to let's overreact to something that happened in a game. They overreact to. Oh, this team traded for this guy for the rest of the year. This team signed this guy. This team drafted this guy. Those are 5-year moves, right? Those are the 5-year plans that you're saying, oh, you made a trade for somebody in the moment to go for it now, or you signed a guy to a 5-year contract, or you drafted somebody who you think is going to be around in 5 years. That's totally the point of it. That's what they get invested in. Everybody was saying it's Nolan Patrick. It was Nico Hischier or Nolan Patrick. Everybody was saying that.
Right, but we're looking at it with hindsight being 2020.
Well, right, but I'm saying go beyond the next three, because that's what we always mention. We go to the next three and go Heiskanen, Makar, Pettersson. Oh, well, you take any three of those. But go beyond it. Would you take Cody Glass?
Yep. Over Nolan Patrick at this point, just because he's produced more.
And then, look, from there, you can make an argument for a couple of the next ones in line. Elias Anderson, Casey Middlestat, Michael Rasmussen.
Tough to make an argument for any of them right now. Elias Anderson's still in Europe. Elias Anderson went back to Europe.
Right. Casey Middlestat's
a bust.
Middlestat's playing with Buffalo. He's getting better with, I guess, an increased role. But I'm not, he's not what he was advertised to be that year. I thought he was going to be a pretty decent player for them.
Buffalo, and we've touched on it briefly on this show, Buffalo's a little bit of a dumpster fire. They're starting to become one of those organizations. Remember, for a while, nobody wanted to touch anybody coming out of Edmonton because all their prospects were just ruined. Right? Nobody was touchable out of Edmonton because everyone who came out of Edmonton just sucked the second they left. Buffalo's getting there. Buffalo feels a little bit like a poison apple, and we talked about it a little bit. But
all right, so I'm skipping some names beyond 5, right? I gave you everybody behind Nolan Patrick from 3 to 6.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list too here. I'll take
7,
Martin Nikish at 12.
There you go. That's one.
Hello.
How about Nick Suzuki at 13? Would you take him?
Yep, I'd take Brandstrom at 15.
How about this? I would take Robert Thomas at 20 or Philip Hedl at 21.
Yep. How about
Tyler Yamamoto at 22?
Yep.
Certainly, and then beyond that, you've got guys who are kind of not yet recognized potential yet.
Right.
Paling should be a really good player down the road. He hasn't really broken through yet. We still haven't seen Morgan Frost break through. There's a possibility. If Morgan Frost didn't get hurt this year, there's a possibility he could have better offensive numbers than Nolan Patrick this year.
I think
if given the same number of games, if given the same same role,
I'll go one step further. I think he would have.
I think he'd need to get the power play time that Patrick's getting, but yeah, I don't know if I would be surprised.
But if he had played more, he would have gotten Nolan Patrick power play time because he would have earned it. That's how I look at that. With the season Nolan Patrick had, I think they were desperately looking for a way to get him off the power play because they just need someone there who can actually do something.
Let's put it this way, okay? Nolan Patrick's numbers this year. Now I'm going to read it. I realized how wrong I was when I just guessed that. I gave him 30-31, which I know to be fact, for the first 2 years of his career. And then I said, what is he at, 13? He's at 8. 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points. And I think
most of them, if I recall
correctly, 5
of
them were in the first
early.
week. Yeah, 5 of them were in the first week of the season, by the way.
Yeah, Nolan Patrick's had a poor season.
Here's the reason I'm bringing that up, okay? There are 9 games left in the season. It is not inconceivable at this point that Wade Allison could finish with the same number of goals as Nolan Patrick. He's got 1. Nolan Patrick has 4. Wade Allison is getting opportunities enough that against a team like New Jersey, he might score 3 more goals. And in 5 more games against the Devils for the rest of the year, 4 this week, 1 to end the season, I could see it happening.
Now, there is one more player I want to talk about here if we're talking about kind of evaluating the current Flyers roster and how good we maybe think they are.
Okay.
Joel Farabee.
Okay.
Because let's break this down, right? Last season, he was solid, very good, rookie, kind of learning his way up. This season, he starts out on fire. I think he was shooting 18% through the first 2 months of the season. He was lighting it up. And since then, it's been pretty quiet.
I mean, that's collectively.
Well, right, the whole team. And I don't know if we're talking enough about the COVID break and the apparent impacts of how this team looked after the COVID break, because it's night and day. After that, he's been very quiet. Very quiet. And again, the whole team kind of has. But Joel Farabee was also, in the early part of the season, he was the guy scoring the clutch goals that fire the team up. He was the spark in a lot of these situations. So how much of the back half of the season was, basically PDO coming back to normal and his shooting percentage, regressing back to where it should be?
I'd feel worse about him if he wasn't getting opportunities. He's still getting. I mean, how many chances did he have? against the Rangers over the weekend.
A penalty shot, a breakaway 2 minutes after
that's
that.
That's not even like he's had 2 penalty shots this season. Yep. I mean, he hasn't scored on them, obviously. He's not, I wouldn't call him a shootout specialist yet then in that regard, but you know what I mean?
I bet I know what he's doing this summer.
I mean, well, this summer he should continue to get stronger. Actually, is what he should do. Like you need to.
Porque no los dos.
They need guys who show that toughness, and I hate when people talk about it and basically kind of revert back to they need guys who drop the gloves and things like that. Like you don't need Wayne Simmons reincarnated to be a tough guy. But you need to have that mindset. You need to have this, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to stand up for the people who I want, like who I need to stand up for. I'm going to play this game with an edge because that's what wins.
Yeah.
That's what every team that's made the playoffs to this point has, and it's what every team that will has. You know, there's somebody who you've got to have an edge. And yes, you have to toe the line, and yes, we don't know exactly what clean hits are anymore, and we don't know what's suspension worthy anymore.
If you shove someone very lightly from behind, you're probably going to get a 5 in a game.
Which one?
Sam Moran.
Oh, okay. Because
that one was atrocious.
Because what I was getting at is that last week I'm sitting there and I see a video clip that kept repeating through my Twitter account on Sunday afternoon. That was Garnet Hathaway throwing a tall player like Tenorti into the boards, and the official standing right there doesn't make a call. They let play carry on for 10 seconds, and then finally decide, oh wait, we should blow a whistle. The guy's bleeding.
There's nothing worse than the call 10 seconds later.
And not only that, but to then assess a major in a game misconduct after the fact,
it feels very Logan Couture, Sharks, Knights, Western Conference Final.
It doesn't even feel like that to me. You either know it or you don't, and if you don't know it, then
you can't call it.
Not even that. It should have just been called from the beginning, which means that I've seen people over the last few days say the officiating needs a total reform at this point. Probably true. Probably true.
And the officials have had an interesting season too, because we didn't really talk about the whole open mic makeup call situation, we're not going to. But.
I would say I did on an episode of Open Ice Hits when it happened and stuff like that.
That whole thing was a mess. Speaking of messes, I'm going to transition us here. The Flyers are going to play 4 games against the Devils this week.
Yeah.
Before this show started, I told you I had a little bit of a conversation topic I wanted to bring up.
No boy.
I'm looking at these 4 games, and
you're getting into this by sitting here saying, "Oh, you said before the show you had a topic you wanted to throw to me."
Oh yeah, we haven't gotten to it yet.
Hold on, not without giving any disclosure on what it's going to be, because you wanted it to be natural for me to hear about it for the first time. But you're leading into mentioning that by talking about how there's 4 this week.
So 4 games.
This isn't going to be good.
4 games against the Devils. What is your favorite sweep in Flyers playoff history? Do you have one?
How far back do I got to go to find one?
Well, there's the 97 Stanley Cup Finals. Oh, wait, that wasn't a good sweep. Oh, no. Well, listen, it might not be a real sweep, but I'll take those 4 games against Boston in 2010 any day of the week.
You're talking about what? Are you talking about a favorite 4 wins in a row, or actually a sweep in a playoff?
You can call it a sweep. You can call it 4. I'm cheating a little bit. It was a reverse sweep, right? You go down 0-3, and then you reverse sweep the Bruins. It's still kind of a sweep. But I figure we have 4 miserable games this week, and I'm thinking about what games I should be watching instead, right? Like game 1. Maybe that's what I'll do. I'll watch one of those comeback wins from the Bruins before each Devils game this week, right? So right before I watch the Flyers play the Devils tonight, I'll watch Simone Gagne score the overtime winner in Game 4 to turn the series.
I mean, here's the other thing about it, okay? Here's your Sunday night lineup for you as we get ready for this. The Flyers are playing the Devils. I believe the Devils are already eliminated from the playoffs, by the way. The Flyers will be soon.
Just about, yeah.
At 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, you have Boston-Pittsburgh. There is one to watch, right?
Yeah.
That could be good. You have the Rangers and the Sabres at 6 o'clock. One team of which is out, one team of which could be out by the end of the week.
He's almost out, right?
And then at 7 o'clock, you have Tampa Bay against Columbus. Columbus is officially out of the playoffs, by the way. Tampa Bay is probably borderline officially in.
Yeah, but they're fighting for positioning there. Like Tampa actually has things to play for.
You're right. Their games matter because of positioning. You're right because
they're struggling with Florida. Like that's a really close division. They could still win that division. They're currently 3rd.
They could, but I do find it fascinating that they could finish 3rd.
They could finish third. They could be on the road
be a road playoff team.
Man, how much does the NHL want Florida to play Tampa in the first round? How bad does the NHL want Carolina to win that division so they can put Florida and Tampa Bay, do the interstate rivalry thing? Come on. You know they want it. Carolina might get a lot of makeup calls the rest of the way.
I would rather. All right, so here's what I would rather have happen. Honestly, it still has the potential to happen, I guess, down the road. But I would either if there was somehow a way to be able to potentially set the stage for that to happen in the following round. Well,
you can do that if one of them wins the division and the other one gets second or third, then they'll play. In the second round.
Because here's what I'm saying, and I'm not saying.
The problem is, I don't trust Florida to win a series. I don't trust Sergei Bobrovsky to win a playoff series.
So here's the funny part, because you're right. Nashville was out of it. However many weeks ago,
they were selling everybody except for what was it? Pekka Rinne, Roman Josi, and Philip Forsberg.
I guess, and then they didn't sell at all.
Well, right, but they publicly came out and said that everyone was for sale except those 3 players, and then they won, I think, 9 of 10 and got themselves in the playoff race.
And I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. The fact that you've got so much interdivision play could change everything in a second. Dallas could get on a run and make the playoffs again. They have 2 extra games, or Nashville could hold on and make the playoffs. If Nashville makes the playoffs because they get on a roll toward the end and find a way to do this, watch out.
They're going to be dangerous.
They're going to be a tough team.
Because their backs were against the wall, and when your team rallies like their team has rallied, again, they were publicly selling every single thing that wasn't nailed down. And the team rallied and said, no, screw that. We're not selling. We're winning games. We're making the playoffs. And if they make the playoffs, they're going to come in hot.
Well, that's also David Poile for you. You know, he kind of goes with the flow as is needed, and there's a reason why he's had control of that team the entire time. You know, there's a reason
the entire time.
Yeah, there's
he's
a reason
the only
why
GM in franchise history.
Right, but there's a reason why it's lasted for that long, because even when you look at the trade that was made with the Flyers way back when they get Scott Hartnell and Chemo Team in on expiring contracts and re-sign them like it was essentially a sign and trade, if you will.
A trade and sign.
Well, yeah, but it sounds better the other way.
I know.
But it was essentially one of those, and yet you get, it's as if David Poile in that moment also, though, knew that was the right time to sell something, and make a deal like that, because down the road, as Chemo Timonen was retiring and as Scott Hartnell was getting ready to retire, as he was playing out his career with Columbus, here come the Predators with all these draft picks and all these players who have amounted to something, and now they're a contender for a little while. And, did it last long? Not necessarily. I mean, it lasted for probably about 2 or 3 years.
Stanley Cup Finals, though. You got there.
They did, but they were
if you don't get screwed by an early whistle, maybe you win Game 6.
I still don't think they would have won Game 7.
I know. I know, but it would have been insane.
That playoff series was very Flyers-Bruins of 74, where you needed the home game against the team with the clinching scenario in order to basically say, this is where it's got to happen, and if it doesn't happen here, it's not happening.
That Nashville crowd is the most rabid crowd I've seen in the United States, right? Because Montreal is its whole separate. But that's the most rabid crowd I think I've seen for an NHL team in the United States. And the fact that it was in Tennessee is very impressive. But
this is why they want to do as much as they can with that. I mean, there was, not to shift gears into a totally different area, but before the Phillies got Dave Dombrowski to be their president of baseball operations, whatever, he was in negotiations, or he was running at the forefront of an operation to get a Major League Baseball team in Nashville.
That would be interesting.
And I think a lot of it has to do with, you've got the Titans, you've got the Predators. Look how great hockey's worked. Football's worked there for years.
Memphis had a basketball team. I don't know if they still do.
They don't.
The Memphis Grizzlies aren't there anymore?
No.
Okay. That's the last one.
No, they are. No, they are. I'm sorry.
Oh, the Memphis Grizzlies are still there?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
They got it. It happened. It still happened relatively recently, yes.
Okay. Memphis, not
Nashville,
but
Memphis is far enough away that you could have technically put a team in Nashville too, but here's the problem with Nashville to an extent with that. You need that building half of the year for live music as much as you need it for hockey.
Such a crowded venue.
You can't have
an NBA team there too.
You can't do what the Wells Fargo Center does and say, by the way, it's going to be a place for, like, you already need, when you have an arena, you already need to compensate for not just concerts, which, hello, you're nicknamed the Music City. You kind of need to have concerts.
You're going to have music venues.
But you also need it for the other stuff. Like, you do need to have, I don't know if this really would happen, but, like, let's say you need to be a place where the Harlem Globetrotters go, or you need to be a place where you have the circus come or something. Like, you know what I mean? Or
in Nashville, any room with more than 30 chairs in it is automatically designated a music venue. Basically, just with how many acoustic guitars are roaming around that city.
I would say quite literally, with the fact that they have, like, there's one of the famous venues in there literally I think holds maybe 100 people.
Right, and I know you're a bit of a country music fan, so I'm sure you know more about Nashville than I do.
But that's not what the show is about, so we're not going to.
No, it's certainly not. So listen, we're glancing around.
I'm just saying, because I've always liked the Preds as, like, a number 2 team for me. So, like, if they make the playoffs, I'll definitely be invested in that.
I think I've decided that Seattle's going to be my number 2 team, but honestly, I like a lot of Dallas Stars.
Oh, I do too. Dallas was always one of my teams.
They're a fun organization. But either way, so I'm looking at the standings. Do me a favor and pull up the NHL standings in the playoff race real quick. I know you have it. In division, what is the playoff matchup you're most excited to see as an NHL fan? Because for me,
in each. Or
it's just one. Because for me, it's Vegas, Colorado when they meet in the second round.
Assuming they do.
When they meet in the second round.
No.
I don't see Minnesota winning a playoff series against either of those teams. They could win a playoff series.
That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is assuming that I guess you're right. Because not unless Minnesota gets on a total roll and closes in on both. I mean...
Right. Well, I mean, Minnesota would have to win the division. And if that happens, they just play in the first round, and that's even better. But either way, I have a feeling these two teams are going to meet. They seem destined to meet in a year where, you play your division for the first 2 rounds. That series is going to be fun.
Here's what happens with that. We might as well just stick to this, and I'll just pull up the playoff races
sure.
again, because let's just go right back to it. We're having more fun talking about this than we are about the Flyers.
It's fun talking about good teams, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and that's why we had fun last year.
And that's why Open Ice Hits is so much fun with Hunter Brody.
Just wait until the playoffs come around. One of the things, we're talking about doing something during the playoffs. I don't know if we're going to do it because we've already had enough. What I call it, when we used to be doing 2 episodes a week, now we're kind of doing 1. And I kind of attribute that to, I'm calling it that the Flyers' performance have burnt Broads out on hockey.
Oh, I was going to say, is it because Broads has 4 million things going on and works
100-hour
work weeks?
Well, it is, but I also sit there and I say, like, you can lose interest in one sport really quickly when the team you have to talk about the most is not worth talking about.
Hi. I will fully admit here, as the host of this podcast, it's been tough.
You didn't sit here losing brain cells during the second period of the Flyers-Rangers game on Monday like I did?
I sat here. Don't you worry. I sat here and lost.
Okay. No, but see, I wouldn't blame you. I've sat there. You've put this in the chat before. I sit there and go,
I've checked out on this team.
I have to.
Yeah. I have checked out on this team. If they go down 2-0 in the first 10 minutes, I'm gone. I'd rather play Warzone. Like, I really would. Because, and it's not, there's no effort. That's the biggest thing. There is no drive. There is no bite. There's no hope that they're going to come back. They go down 2-0, and I know I'm going to watch 50 minutes of dump and chase and turnovers at the blue line. Why am I going to watch that?
Because you've seen it all year. That's why. There's no reason to believe anything different. Like the takeaways I wrote from Friday's game going into Saturday, which as I sat there during the second period, as I'm watching a 2-1 Ranger game that has really had not much happen.
You feel your sanity slipping away?
Well, I did, but also I'm sitting there going, I don't even know if I'm writing a takeaways article from this game because I'm like, I can't find 5 things that are worth taking away.
Can you just take all of it away?
Well,
so I don't have to think about it anymore.
Like I sit there and I'm supposed to try to pull 5 takeaways, and basically the only thing I had through 2 periods of that game was eventually I did find more things to talk about than that, because I literally just wrote a section on the second period was awful from both sides. Like, it's easy to see why both of these teams won't make the playoffs. And oh, by the way, the biggest thing about that second period was the missed opportunity on a 5-on-3 where the Flyers can't get anything going.
Right.
You know, that's probably
right. You score there, and we got a whole different game, and maybe we get some energy.
And the third period might be better because it's a tie game.
That's an opportunity you have to capitalize on it. How long was that 5-on-3?
1:22.
It was, I was going to say, it was significantly over a minute. It was a very long 5-on-3.
So bad to the point where, let's put it this way, you got the one-timer in place for Gostisbehere, broke his stick. He then tried
New York
to make
have
a pass.
2 rushes during that 5-on-3?
Yes. Or at least
2.
one. At least one. I don't know if they had 2.
I think they had another rush that ended up not really developing into a chance, but they definitely had at least one like legitimate score.
They had at least 3 clean breakouts of the zone during that 5-on-3.
And for what it's worth,
one, like I said, one because Gostisbehere broke his stick on a one-timer, so that was an instant turnover. He then got a new stick, flubbed a pass trying to make a play. That was a turnover. And then toward the end of the power play, which by that point might have been, I don't know if it was still a 5-on-3 at that point, but then they did get like a semi-odd man rush going the other way.
That was the 5-on-4, yeah. It was when the first guy came out of the box.
Okay, fine, but it's still like, again, it was still a clean breakout.
So the Flyers did lose that game 4-1. It is worth noting that Alex Lyon was in net for the Flyers. Carter Hart's been dealing with that little lower body injury.
No, so that's a great thing.
Is he going to play tonight?
No.
Okay, so at time of recording,
at time of recording, by the way, as I'm watching, because I'm glad you brought this up now.
Great, yeah.
The morning skate was happening as we were recording. They're not doing media until 3:30 this afternoon, but the pregame skate was already happening. Brian Elliott is not skating today because he does not skate on days when he starts, so he's in.
Okay, so he's starting. Okay.
Carter Hart.
So that's no Carter Hart again.
But Carter Hart was not even on the ice, and apparently neither was Shane Gostisbehere. So now we have to go and ask about Shane Gostisbehere. Is there anything wrong with him?
At this point, Carter Hart doesn't touch the ice unless he is 100% in my book.
Okay,
there's nothing to play for.
That part's fair. I've seen this question, or I've been asked this question. Do you just shut him down at this point with the year he's had?
I don't think you shut him down.
I don't think they want to. Like, if he can get back out there, not to mention the fact that whether it was today, whether it's Tuesday, whether it's Thursday, whether it's Saturday, whatever, you have 5 games left against the New Jersey Devils from here until the end of the season. If you can put him into a game this week against New Jersey this week, and you can put him into the last game of the season against the Devils and maybe let him go out with a win, because it doesn't really matter.
He needs it on his confidence.
It's not like you're bad. It's also not like you're playing games down the stretch here where you're going, gee, you know what? Your draft position is going to get that much better with this game or that game or whatever. You've kind of come too far at this point.
Well, so I'm looking at it. I'm looking at the league standings right now, and the Flyers are sitting with 49 points. You could reasonably fall all the way down to probably Calgary at 45. Flyers could get a
22nd.
Yeah, right, to 22nd. Yeah,
they can get a top 10 pick. I'm not saying they can't.
Could theoretically spike with the new lottery rules.
They could. It's not exactly the best year to worry about that. Like, the draft is not going to be. And first of all, not only is the draft not going to be the best that
the draft's a crapshoot because no one's played.
Well, exactly. The only benefit to that is that there's a lot of scouts out there who, like, and these are the scouts. I follow some scouts on Twitter who are not necessarily team scouts, but like these are the people who put together the draft guides and the books and all that stuff. Right. So these are guys who you will see tweeting about stuff in season as they go through. A lot of the teams in the NHL are going to hold off on OHL players because there was no season, and that means they are going to get higher potential in later rounds. So if you're picking in the second round at, what would this be? If the Flyers, let's say, finished 22nd in the league, got a top 10 pick, which I guess would be 9th at that point, maybe 10th because of Seattle.
Right. Or if somebody bumps you for draft lot, whatever. 10th.
Right. However it works. 10th. Well, because Seattle's going to get a good pick. Right. It always happens that way. So let's say it's 10th. That means you're picking 41st, 42nd in the second round. Imagine if you land a guy who people would have thought, if he had played this year, he would have been a first rounder. Like, that's another way to get a first rounder.
Not even the second round. You could be getting guys in the 4th, 5th rounds that if they had played would have gone in the second round. Like, this is going to be the
Zayd
craziest
Wisdom.
year. Yeah. This is going to be the wildest year in terms of player evaluation that we've ever seen. And I'd be willing to bet a large sum of money that a guy who plays 1,000 games is drafted in like the 5th round or later. It's that kind of year.
It could be. I don't know about 1,000 games, but I get your point. Like, somebody who we're gonna talk about for a long time, someone who could be a superstar player down the line for anybody, not just we're not talking about the Flyers.
Also, I mentioned a games milestone here, so I did want to mention, we talked about Patrick Marleau on last week's show, and he did indeed break the record. He didn't retire just to troll and tie Gordie Howe. Sorry, I know we mentioned it last week, and I just wanted to circle back and say, yes, he did indeed play and break the record.
You know what I really appreciate about that, by the way? And he hasn't missed a game in forever anyway, also. Like
more than 900 is his Ironman streak?
Which is not even the longest in the league right now, if you can believe
Insane.
that. Keith Yandel's longer.
Insane.
But those two players, Yandel and Marlowe, with their consecutive games, have played enough games that more people, like more than the average player, see in their career.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason why they separate, these guys who play 1,000 games.
Right.
From
There's
the
a
rest,
reason that the plateau is at a 1,000. Like that's the
because
big
it doesn't
milestone.
happen often.
Yep.
Right. It doesn't happen often. But
if you're Chris Chelios, you play 14.99.
Yeah, I hear you.
You know that story, right? The Babcock scratch story.
Yes, I was gonna say I knew there was something with the coach and stuff
coming down the stretch. He needed to play every game to get 1,500, and he got healthy scratch, so he ended the season on 14.99. Oof. Not one of Mike Babcock's best looks, and
is that who that was, or is it?
It was Babcock. Absolutely.
No. Is that who the player was, though?
Oh, it was Chris Chelios.
No, guess what?
What's that?
Mike Modano was playing for the Detroit Red Wings in 2011.
Maybe it's Mike Modano.
And finished with 14.99. I was going to say, I thought that
No,
he
it was
finished
Modano. It wasn't Chelios. I'm stupid.
Because
Chelios was the one.
Chelios played for 20-some-odd years.
Right. Chelios was the one that Babcock played for the first shift of the Winter Classic and then sat him the rest of the game.
But Mike Modano, who was a clear-cut Hall of Fame player, best American player that ever lived,
and you don't let him get 1,500.
And he did not get to, and he never got to play 1,500.
I wonder if the Dallas Stars called him and offered him a contract for the next season just to let him play one game.
I don't know about that. I think he was done. Let's just say he's also gone, started his career in Minnesota, obviously, because that's where the Stars were at that point. They were still the North Stars when he got drafted. Moved to Dallas, became the superstar he was, won a Stanley Cup, becomes one of the best players of all time, best American player of all time probably. Goes to Detroit for that final year. And then ultimately gets all the accolades in Dallas when he goes into the Hall of Fame, gets his number retired, all that type of stuff. He's working for Minnesota again, though. He's working in the Wild organization because he is out there tweeting things about Kirill Kaprizov getting Calder this year. He's he's running the campaign.
All right, quick question. How old was Gordie Howe when he came back to play with his kids? Or how old was he for that last All-Star game? Wasn't he 52?
He played until he was 51.
Okay, Mike Modano's only 50. He can come back and play a game. Let's go. One game, Modano. Come on, Mike. Strap the skates on, take one more shift, and get 1,500. You know you want to.
The problem is I don't know if he could play for anybody other than the Dallas Stars at that point in time, even if he did decide to play for Minnesota, let's say.
Any organization?
Yeah, okay.
If Mike Modano called and said, hi, I would like to come back for literally one game, retire with your franchise, and reach a career milestone of 1,500 games, 32 out of 32 NHL organizations would sign him immediately. Just for the story. Just for the PR, the story.
Yeah, maybe.
Yes, I agree that Dallas would be the most likely option, with Minnesota probably being a close second. But no team would turn it down. He could call the Ottawa Senators. Eugene Melnyk might say no.
All right. Now, in fairness, by the way, it wasn't until I believe anyway. It wasn't until after his playing career that he actually started a family and all that type of stuff. He's got kids.
Come on, Mike.
Younger kids.
Come back. Let your kids watch you play a game.
He's also very happy doing what he does in whatever the role is. I don't know exactly.
You don't want your kids to see you play a game, Mike? Just once?
He's got the stories, and he's a Hockey Hall of Famer. What? He's got nothing else to accomplish.
Yeah, sure he does. He needs to play one more game to get to 1,500.
Well, I was gonna sit there and say, outside of playing for the team that literally employs him at the moment in Minnesota, or coming back to play the obvious choice with Dallas, would one of the other best players of the '90s, in Steve Yzerman, say, "Here's a one-game contract"?
Joe Sakic might do it.
Hypothetically. No, I don't see it happen though, because there's no connection there. Yes, Joe Sakic. As a matter of fact, they probably had more of a rivalry because there were some good playoff series between those two teams. Not that Detroit didn't have series against them. Going in hindsight, by the way, I'm going to have some fun with you on this one. It definitely was not Chris Chelios, because Chris Chelios finished with 1,651 games.
No, it was definitely Modano. No.
Here's the fun part, though. I'm going to have some fun with you on this. Do you know who Chris Chelios finished his playing career with? Who did he play his last NHL game with?
Oh, God. Chris Chelios, Chicago?
No, he started with Chicago. As a matter of fact, he's probably I'm sorry.
Oh, see, it's Chicago, so I just assumed they re-signed him 6 different times.
I'm sorry, he started with Montreal. I'm sorry about that, but he then played with Chicago, and quite honestly, I would say he's probably better known as a Blackhawk than anything.
Well, I'm surprised the Blackhawks didn't re-sign him 4 different times because they love getting the band back together. How many times have they traded for Brandon Saad?
That's true. He played 7 seasons with Montreal. Then he played
Montreal, Chicago.
He played 9. Yeah, he played 9 with Chicago. So yes,
Right.
he's probably better known as. And then he had
Then he was in Detroit. Did he go somewhere? He went somewhere else after Detroit. Is it what I'm assuming here, just based on?
He played for one other team. He did not. And quite frankly, his years in Detroit, I counted 10, but he had 1 year that lasted 28 games, and he didn't put up any points the entire time. And he also had 1 season where he only played 24 games. Like his total number of games played, I think.
Yeah.
But I think his total number of games played, I'd have to look at a different. I'm on Wikipedia, and unfortunately not Hockey Reference because it was the first thing that popped up when I typed his name in. If I was on Hockey Reference, I'd be able to see. I believe he has more games played with Chicago than he does with Detroit.
Oh yeah,
even
certainly.
though he played with. Here's Hockey Reference anyway.
Let me guess here. I'm gonna say this because I feel like everybody ends up playing the end of their career with this team.
Okay.
Was it St. Louis?
No.
Okay, because I feel like everybody ends up in St. Louis to run out the skid.
I am telling you right now, as I have you trying to guess this, it is such a fun anecdote. It's so ridiculous that's why I'm bringing it up, because it is so ridiculous.
Hit me.
He played 7 games in the 2009-2010 season for the now defunct Atlanta Thrashers. He was an Atlanta Thrasher for 7 games. It's why it's too good not to talk about.
Is he the best player in Winnipeg Jets history?
No, I don't think so.
He might be the most accomplished player in Winnipeg Jets history to have played for the Winnipeg Jets franchise. How about that?
It's not Kovalchuk?
At this point, it might be like Wheeler, honestly.
The most accomplished, though? I mean, hell, at that point, Bufflin's more accomplished than that.
I guess you're right.
I mean, Bufflin at least won a cup, too.
He's not a Jet anymore, right? Isn't he retired? Whatever. He's not playing hockey.
It does blow my mind a little bit how long, how many years, because Chelios played for a long time. It blows my mind how many years Chelios played to not only to eventually win a cup. I mean, he went through 7 years with Montreal, 9 years with Chicago, no cups, and had to go to Detroit.
We're talking about prominent organizations, right? We're not talking about San
Chicago
Jose and LA.
Chicago wasn't the best during those years, but
no, but they're still an original 6. They're still one of those franchises.
But he had chances. I mean, Montreal made a cup final while he was a member of that team, I believe.
Okay. All right, I don't know how we got on Chris Chelios and all these guys.
Because you thought Chris Chelios was the guy that Mike Babcock said, no, you're not playing.
No, you're right, and it was actually Mike Modano. You're right. But he did have a Chelios story, the whole Winter Classic, played him for 1 shift, didn't play him the rest of the game. I don't know if you've heard the story.
Oh, never mind. I said that wrong. Oh, man, he never did make a cup final with Montreal. He was gone by the time they made.
Oh, okay.
Or not unless they did in one of those years in the middle of the 80s, but he wasn't on the 93 team.
Well, that team won, didn't they?
Yeah, they did win. That's true.
Yeah, so he wasn't. Yeah.
He didn't win a cup until he went to Detroit, and he was on the 01-02 team, which was loaded, and then was still there when they won a cup all those years later.
If you followed our brackets about a year ago, the 01 Detroit Red Wings were definitely on our bracket of greatest teams of all time, and if the poll had been conducted among non-Flyers fans, it might have actually won.
No, there we go. Okay, hold on a minute. He won a Stanley Cup. I'm sorry, it didn't take him that long to win a Stanley Cup. My bad. He won a Stanley Cup. He won with Montreal in 86.
Oh, okay.
There was a year between the Gretzky years.
Okay.
You know, because Gretzky won 4 cups in 5 years with the Oilers. The
insane.
year between was Montreal winning a cup with guys like Chris Chelios.
Wow.
And then he won a cup in 2002 and 2008. To be honest, the reason that's hard to remember is it's been so long since a team from Canada won a Stanley Cup, and obviously that's one of the biggest rumblings. Let's get it back here. This is how we're gonna get back on the rails.
Let's circle back.
Because here's the thing. There's somebody from the North Division who's a Canadian team is going to be among the Final 4 in the NHL this year.
Yep.
And that could be
who's your Final 4? If you had to pick right now, who wins each division, and I don't mean in the regular season, but who comes out of each division once the bracket starts?
I'm big. Okay, so I'll try to go with the easiest ones I have first, and then I'll go to the tougher ones.
Toronto's the easy one here, right? They're coming through
Canada. I actually
no?
don't think so because the Canadian division is so it's so weird to me. Like
it is weird.
Like I can watch a game and I go, here's a good example. Calgary can't beat Ottawa for anything this year. I don't know why they can't beat Ottawa. But Calgary will go out and play Montreal really well.
Well, it's because Brady Tkachuk is clearly the superior Tkachuk brother. That's obviously the reason.
Maybe that's it. I don't know.
He's in his older brother's head.
I'm not saying this is who I think is definitively going to come out of this division, but this is who I like the most.
Listen, we're making predictions here. We're having some fun.
I know. I love Colorado. I think Colorado's a team to watch in the West. That's who I think. Like you're hyping up. You're hyping up that Vegas Colorado potential series, which would be who puts, who decides who comes out of that division.
The winner of that series is going to come out of that division. Whenever
and it is between those two to me.
Yeah. But whenever they meet, the winner of that series is going to be the one who carries the division, whether they meet in the first round or the second round.
But there's nothing that says for sure and certain just because we're looking at it and go, oh, Vegas is leading the division. There's no guarantee that's the way it finishes.
No, and Colorado has 2 games in hand, so we're looking at they have a similar number of points here. Like if they win those 2 games in hand, they're tied.
What Colorado needs at this point, because they lost on Saturday to St. Louis. What they need at this point is basically to get their guys back. They had a little bit of a COVID shutdown. Grubauer's not playing yet. He's off the list. Rantanen's still on the list. You need to get those guys back and go from there. And then that'll determine whether or not, you make it or not. Not going to lie, out of the Central, I like Carolina.
Carolina is scary. And, here's the thing with Carolina. You're going to win your first-round matchup. You're going to beat Nashville or Dallas unless Dallas comes with an absolute fury, which they can absolutely do.
Or Nashville does.
I imagine Carolina's probably... Yeah, but I think Dallas has more talent than Carolina or than Nashville and can put up a better fight.
I mean, we also just said that Nashville could put together one of those runs because they've gotten hot and literally went from being... I mean, what...
They
literally...
could. They could.
But literally, what was it? It was a week and a half before the trade deadline, and it was, they're going to sell, get ready. And they're not talking about short-term selling. They're talking about selling long-term
selling everybody. Victor Arvidsson was on the block.
Arvidsson, Ryan Ellis, who wasn't even playing at the time. Ryan Ellis is going to get moved. Matthias Ekholm's going to get moved. They kept all of them, and now they're in a playoff spot. Don't count that team out. That's all I'm saying.
No, I know. That being said, you look at Carolina, and if their goalies are half decent, which they've been this year, they're just so good. Their forward core is really good, and their defensive core is absurd. If you followed hockey for any period of time, which obviously you do if you're listening to this show, you know that the Carolina Hurricanes have a lot of good defensemen. They traded Hayden Fleury at the deadline. Did anyone even notice? Because they're just still so stacked up everywhere else. Carolina Hurricanes are a very good team. I would love to see Carolina-Tampa in a series because I think that's going to be a lot of fun, especially if we're talking about a Tampa team that has Steven Stamkos back because he's missing some time right now, that has Nikita Kucherov back because they cheated LTIR and Nikita Kucherov's been started skating 10 weeks before the playoffs, but no, he can't come back. It's okay. Anyway, they're going to be very good. The fact that they got to add at the deadline because they have all this LTIR money, Tampa's scary. Tampa's always scary, but
let's remember it's also incredibly hard to repeat as champions. I mean, I know it happened recently with Pittsburgh, but ask yourself why Washington didn't win 2 in a row, or why
St. Louis didn't
win 2 in a row, or better yet, go back a little further and go, even in a year when they were constantly winning, Chicago never won twice in a row, neither did LA. Boston was a great team in those times, did not win twice in a row, couldn't back up the 11 Cup with 1 and 12.
They didn't even win twice.
Right, I know, but that's what I'm saying. There's not anybody out there aside from Pittsburgh who you can sit there and say...
Who's been able to run it back.
Right, with maybe the exception of... going back to the Detroit teams of that late 90s, early 2000s, which just continued to get better.
They went back-to-back with the Pittsburgh Penguins. That was a weird circumstance. The rematch. The Marian Hossa rematch.
Yeah, but neither side won back-to-back.
No.
That's
no,
the thing.
it really isn't very, very difficult. But that doesn't mean they're not going to get out of the division.
You brought up like you're mentioning Tampa being scary. You brought up Carolina's goaltending for a moment. I had to go and look because I'm like, who actually is like the number one goalie?
I believe
this
it's
year?
James Reimer, isn't it?
Reimer has the most games played, but Nedeljkovic is right. No, Mrazek's been hurt a lot.
Oh, you're right. And Nedeljkovic has been coming up recently.
Nedeljkovic has 19 games played now.
Yeah.
And
most of those are over the last month or two.
And 19 starts. And Reimer has 19 starts, 20 games.
Right.
It's about the same. And Nedeljkovic's record, by the way, is 12-4-3. Like, he's really given you – this is translating over. We talked about him before because I mentioned the 5 overtime game that the Phantoms played.
Alex Nedeljkovic has been a guy that the Carolina Hurricanes have been high on for a long time. And I was honestly starting to think that he was never going to come up because we'd heard his name for so long. And he'd been an AHL guy for so long. And they just have such poor goaltenders that you figured eventually he would get a chance. Right? Because they keep signing James Reimer and who was the guy they had not last year, 2 years ago? Old guy. Very old guy. I can't even remember.
Scott Darling.
In for no, it was somebody else. But either way, they have just such a carousel of goalies over the last couple of years.
Maybe Scott Darling was supposed to solve all their problems, and then he retired too.
Well, right. And we've heard for so long that Nedeljkovic is the guy. He's their Carter Hart. He's coming up. He's going to be their starter. He's their guy of the future. And he just never did. So the fact that he is now, I mean, if you're a Carolina Hurricanes fan, it's obviously a good thing for you, but I'm kind of surprised he's bloomed this late, as it were.
I guess. I mean, all right, so here's kind of the scenario, too. I think that if Nashville's going to give a team a problem in that division by playing as the 4 compared to one, or Dallas, I think the team that it's going to be is Florida, if that's the case.
I think Florida is the weakest of the top three there.
But then again, here's the thing. Florida would then have to go on some sort of a mini run to an extent because they have 2 extra games played than everybody else does. Or at least the other top 3, and they're 1 point back at a division lead. While a team has 2 games in hand, it's like I just don't know. Right, I just don't know how they're supposed to be the division winner without basically getting incredibly hot at the end of the season.
Right,
and I don't know how that wouldn't translate to the playoffs, at least the first round. Like I just don't see how. Fair. I mean.
Either way, I am very excited for the playoffs, and we're sitting here about 2 weeks away.
Right, so that's that. Let me see the North. You're probably right. It is Toronto. I can't get a good read on anybody's. I mean, Winnipeg's probably the dark horse.
Connor Hellebuck can steal a series.
Yes.
And not a game, a series. He can win you 3 games single-handedly.
Here's what's got to be asked about that series, because about that first round, because I've even said, like I just said this about it, Calgary can't beat Ottawa, but has no problems beating Montreal
most
or sometimes
other teams, yeah.
or sometimes Toronto or whatever. If Montreal has Toronto's number, then look out, because even in a first, look, Toronto is not going to escape what has plagued them until they do, right?
And we saw Montreal last year play against a number 1 seed Flyers team and look very, very dangerous.
Right. So here's the thing to me. Until Toronto wins a first round playoff series and gets that stigma removed, they're not going to escape it. So they've got to beat Montreal or whoever decides to enter the bottom half of that race, because the top 3, again, I shouldn't say top 3. Number 1, pretty close to well set. 2 and 3, kind of going back and forth for home ice. Number 4, take your pick. Because there's still, in the grand scheme of things, here's the way it really plays out. There's a path for Calgary to make the playoffs if they kind of get on a roll and Montreal struggles. There's a path for Vancouver to make the playoffs if they get on a roll with all the extra games they have left to play, and that's about it.
It's going to be tough for them to get on a roll just because they have so many games to play.
They do, and it's also going to come down to, you're asking guys to play a lot of hockey that missed with what they missed,
And you got guys who aren't necessarily the happiest to be at work right now. We've heard some comments from JT Miller. We've heard some other comments.
Well, you could say that about other teams, too.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a whole thing with Robin Lehner in Vegas.
No other team was shut down for a month, right? They were the longest shut down by far. And it happened so late in the season.
Talk about a whirlwind for Robin Lehner, by the way, because Robin Lehner said what he said about the NHL making promises about what they would be able to do if they got vaccinated and stuff like that.
And then he walked a lot of it back.
Sort of did, apologize for overreacting and not saying it the way, he really spoke off the cuff. It wasn't asking a question or anything like that.
Some of it might be language barrier stuff.
It could be true.
Fair enough.
No, what I'm saying is that he then posts almost like an apology, I didn't mean for it to be as, I guess, as forward as it was, as vicious as it was, but it still was worth talking about. Then shared like the day later the NBA's plan, because the NBA's thing he had like this screenshot of like whatever memo they got that was, oh, once you are individually fully vaccinated, you can do this, this, and
A,
this.
B, and C, right?
And if teams get 85% vaccinated, then the team collectively can start doing things like this, this, and this. And it was like it involved limiting mask use in certain things. It involved being able to have in-person meetings again because the team is fully vaccinated.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Or close to. Like, and a lot of teams are doing this. Don't get me wrong. Like, I've heard stories all over the place about teams getting vaccinated and doing what they have to do. But I don't know what the extent of promises made were. I think that the goal at the end of this is just to try to get the next season back to a place where they want it to be, you know.
Yeah, and it is looking like we're heading towards a fairly normal 21-22
I heard
season.
October 12th is the target start date.
Which is what, about a week late? Maybe?
If that, I mean,
maybe.
Not necessarily, because there have been seasons that have started that late that finish
That's
on
what
time.
I'm saying, right. So it
Look,
looks like we're heading back towards a pretty normal 21-22 season.
If nothing else, with the exception of the fact being, and this could play a factor in a future season for sure, with the exception of the fact that you're going to have to factor in more travel for the teams that are not close together. What you may start seeing, though, is that if you play a 5-gamer against Pittsburgh, let's say, Flyers-Pittsburgh, it's 5 games in a season.
Right.
You
might see 3 and a 2.
You might, well, at the very least, you'll see, I wouldn't go that far, but I'll say you'll see the 2 in Pittsburgh, just a back-to-back.
Probably on the same weekend, Friday,
right.
Sunday.
You'll
type
see,
thing, yeah.
You'll see the 2 in 2 of the 3 in Philly. Then at that point, probably
and I
on a
think it
back-to-back.
just makes a ton of sense.
It probably does. I don't mind it. I don't love it or hate it per se. Like I'm kind of split down the middle on it because
I think long term it's going to be a good thing.
It probably will. Like
because we get a little. The thing that it does is it eases travel, which we've learned this year is an important thing for players and for everybody involved. The other thing it does that the NHL is going to love is that it gives you that chance for the instant, the instant revenge hit, the instant revenge game, dirty hit Friday, revenge it Sunday. Like it gives you that little rivalry hit. And I think the NHL is really banking on that as a huge reason as to why they're doing this, because we've seen a lot of that this year.
And I take a look at certain games. There's certain teams that are playing each other that I go, you've got something here. When I look at the East, I go, when Boston plays Washington, when the Islanders play Washington, I feel like
the Rangers play the Devils, right?
Not even that though, because the Rangers and the Devils weren't good teams. Like it kind of lost its luster. Like what I'm saying
still
is
has some heat to it.
Like what I'm trying to sit there and say is like the best one in hockey right now should be the Battle of Alberta. Like it should be Edmonton, Calgary, but Calgary hasn't been good enough this year to make it that interesting, because like it's almost like you got one team that is going somewhere, and you got one team that's fighting every game to make
kind of like the Battle of Ontario between Toronto and Ottawa. Like it's not a fair fight at this point in time.
I mean, there isn't even like. We even made up something that made up. Like we've even made something out of Tampa Columbus because of recent playoff series, and that hasn't even really delivered this year because Columbus is doing worse now than Detroit is in the standings.
Yeah, and Detroit, yeah.
I mean, maybe you've got one in like Vegas, Colorado, where you go, yeah, down the road that'd be good. And even then, some of these divisions are going to realign, if you will,
right?
So that this way, you're getting back to the traditional format. So, like, we could sit there and talk about and go, Vegas, Colorado is a good one, but how often will they really see each other? Or is there any other one that we could even create out of that? Like, St. Louis isn't going to be part of that again. St. Louis is going to probably go back to the Central.
Yeah, almost definitely.
Like, it only happened that way because they had to throw other teams into the Central. Like, you had to get, I guess you had to get Detroit back, Columbus back. Like,
I think Arizona's going over as part of the Seattle realignment. Is that correct?
And then Seattle's got to get thrown into the mix too. So you're creating all these new situations. Like, I don't know that the rivalries in this particular season, with a lot of back-to-backs and things like that, I don't know that they've been as good as they could be because of the level of performance from teams. Like we looked at Flyers Penguins and said, "Oh, playing back-to-back should be great for this." And you're going to play 2 more in a week that are meaningless.
Yep, because the Flyers are just dumpster.
Because the Flyers will be out of the playoffs by that point, mathematically.
All right. I think it's time we get out of here. This has been a fun show. We've been talking about the playoffs. We've been talking about a whole bunch of
stuff.
We'll
continue with it next week.
Yeah, we definitely will continue with it next week.
I didn't say who's coming out of the East, by the way, and I don't plan to on this show because of the fact that I don't really know. I can. That's another one I can't get a read on.
Well, you take a week, think about it. Listeners, tweet us who you think is going to win the East at YWT Podcast.
Better yet, tweet us who you think the Final Four will be.
Absolutely. Let's hear your whole Final Four.
Let's hear your Final Four right now.
Especially with who comes out of the East, right? Because that's the one that Kevin didn't talk about. And that is probably the closest race. So we're going to get out of here. Make sure to tweet us those responses at YWT Podcast. Don't forget to include at Kevin_Durso in those tweets too, so Kevin gets that notification. You can follow us everywhere at YWT. We're scrolling along the bottom of the screen: Apple, Google Podcast, Spotify, Podbean, SportsTalkPhilly.com, et cetera, et cetera. We're here every Sunday. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso on Twitter, and you can follow him there for all his stuff. Open Ice Hits with Hunter Brody coming out at least once a week at this point. And
kind of on an unpredictable day too. We don't really
at least once a week. And until then, I think that's just about it. So until then, we'll see you next week.